Hello, Michigan Realtors, and welcome back to a new season of the Letter of the Law. With 2025 in full swing, we are still keeping a keen eye on the practice changes and fielding many questions from members. We have received a number of calls from buyers brokers who believe that if the seller has authorized the listing broker to offer compensation to buyers brokers, the listing broker is legally and ethically obligated to disclose the amount of such offer to any buyers broker who calls. Typically, a listing broker has told the buyer's broker that while the seller has authorized some amount of cooperating compensation, the listing broker is not in a position to disclose the amount of such compensation until the seller has had an opportunity to see the offer being made. Now, the question that arises is, can a listing broker withhold this information? Well, the answer is a nuanced one, and the answer is yes if the seller has authorized and/or directed the listing broker to do so. How, when, and if the listing broker should make an offer to compensate a buyer's broker should be agreed upon at the time the listing agreement is signed. The listing broker should explain the negotiating options to their seller client at the time the listing agreement is signed and act in accordance with the seller's instructions. Remember that at the outset of the buyer brokerage relationship with the buyer, it is the buyer that has agreed to the obligation to pay the buyer's broker. The negotiation that is taking place on the other side of the transaction is what portion of that obligation, if any, will be paid by the listing broker. Now, a seller may certainly choose to disclose the amount of the compensation being offered to all potential buyers brokers in an effort to encourage buyers to view their home. Or a seller may want the listing broker to disclose the fact that the seller has authorized compensation, but not commit to a particular amount. Now, there are several reasons that the seller may wish to handle it this way. First, the seller may want to make certain that their offer is not greater than the amount a particular buyer has agreed to pay their buyer's broker. Remember that the buyer's broker cannot receive more than the buyer has agreed to pay in the buyer's broker contract. Secondly, the seller may not want to offer the same amount regardless of the terms of the purchase offer. The compensation offered may depend on the terms of the offer. Just one example, a seller may be willing to assume a bigger portion of the buyer's commission obligation if the buyer's offer provides the seller with an extended period of post-closing occupancy rent-free. Thirdly, the seller may want to be in a position to negotiate the amount being offered in the event of competing offers. In this situation, a seller may want to offer to pay less of the buyer's commission obligation. Obviously, buyers who are willing and able to pay a portion of their own commission obligation will be in a much stronger bargaining position. To summarize, a listing broker is no longer required to offer the same amount to every potential buyer's broker. Cooperating compensation can now be negotiated on a transaction-by-transaction basis, and as with the purchase price, the listing broker is not required to disclose the seller's bottom line. So, what should a buyer's broker do if the listing broker has not yet agreed to pay a specified amount and the buyer wants help with their buyer broker commission obligation? Well, in this situation, a buyer broker has two options. First, they can handle this situation just like they would if the listing broker was not offering any cooperating compensation. There, the buyer's broker on the buyer's behalf would include a provision in the purchase offer requiring the seller to pay a stated amount of the buyer's broker commission. If the seller is willing to pay this amount directly and the listing contract calls for the listing broker to pay it, presumably the seller and the listing broker would work out some type of amendment to the listing contract. Or the buyer's broker can submit a proposed compensation agreement between brokers with the purchase offer and include a provision in the purchase offer making it contingent upon the listing broker's signature to the compensation agreement between brokers. In either event, the compensation request cannot be more than the amount the buyer has agreed to pay in their agreement with the buyer's broker. Now that's all for this installment. Please keep sending us your questions and comments to the email in the video description. Your input puts us in a great position to thoughtfully address new legal questions or any confusion that might emerge in the marketplace. Until next time, thanks for watching.